Hey folks, this is Abel James and welcome to a special episode of Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. So you guys might not have heard from me from a while. I've been on a bit of a media hiatus, finishing the Wild Diet, which is coming out on April 7th. Get stoked for that. Basically, it's a cookbook in disguise as a diet book. Also working on a new album with Denny, who's been on the show before, of the Tim McGraw Band, and a lot of his cool cats out there in Nashville. Right now, you might be able to hear some animal sounds in the background. We've got goats, horses, chickens, and everything in between. Right now we're in Arizona taking a little bit of respite. Just got back from hanging out with a lot of friends and going skiing up in the mountains in Eden, Utah, which was a great time. I would encourage you guys to go out there no matter what the weather is, cold or warm this time of year. You deserve it. I'm just now starting my media tour for the new book and album, and I'm stoked to be coming back on the radar. We've been spending about the last 6 months almost completely unplugged, living off the grid in international countries, as well as traveling around North America in not just one, but 2 RVs, which has been a heck of a good time. But we've been running on solar, foraging for food in the middle of nowhere, visiting a lot of friends, and even meeting some of you listeners in person. I saw a lot of you at Dave Asprey's Bulletproof Conference out on the West Coast. I actually just finished recording one of my first shows in almost half a year on someone else's show with Dave, which should be coming out on Bulletproof Executive Radio quite soon. And this special episode of the show is with my good friend, Dr. Alan Christianson, who's an avid outdoorsman, an expert in thyroid disorder, as well as the man behind the Adrenal-Reset Diet, which basically gives you lots of fodder and reasons why it's perfectly okay to eat some carbs at night. In fact, it might help you sleep and reverse a lot of other adrenal issues that you might be experiencing, especially if you're overdoing it, as many of us podcast listeners are wont to do. Stay tuned for me coming up on a few other podcasts, Rich Roll, Sarah Gottfried, Pedram Shojai, and many more. I'll also be doing a media tour, hopefully on a few shows in New York City around the beginning of April for the book launch. So if any of you are in the area, I'll be doing plenty of events, so look out for that. Best way to keep in touch, as always, is to go to fatburningman.com, enter your email address, and we'll keep you up to date with giveaways. Oh, in celebration of the book launch, we're giving away a Galaxy Gear S smartwatch, which is, I have one and I love it. It's my favorite watch. That's why I'm giving it away. It's not only a health watch with a lot of cool features like even sensing the UV light to see if you're going to get a sunburn before you get a sunburn, but also it's its own smartphone. So if you like going biking or hiking or walking or out jogging, without your phone, but with the ability to get in touch with people, we're giving one of those away. We're also giving away a lot of kitchen stuff for cooking, my favorite skillet, some chocolate, bacon, oh, so much good stuff. Best way to find that is wilddietbook.com. Plenty of fun to come. All right, so on this show with Dr. Alan, we talk about the Adrenal-Reset Diet, why it's important to not only think about food as food, but also as information your body can use to regulate its own physiology. And we also talk about how I broke my foot, or how Pedram helped me break my foot, and a few other really fun things. So stay tuned for this special episode of Fat Burning Man with Dr. Alan. Hey folks, this is Abel. Thank you so much for tuning in for this special episode with Dr. Alan Christianson. How's it going, Alan?
Hey, it's going great. How you doing, bud?
Doing awesome. So we don't have a whole lot of time here tonight, but I wanted to squeeze this in. Alan, can you tell us a little bit about your work if people aren't familiar with who you are? I know that we've had you on before, and a lot of people, we got great response from our listeners, but for those who don't know you yet, why don't you give a little bio and background?
Sure. I'm a doctor who was a fat kid. Now I'm trying to help the rest of people overcome that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that. That was quick. That was like 7 seconds. Usually it takes like the first half of the show for that to get that. But I like it. You're also an avid outdoorsman, if I do say so myself. Actually, I think last time I saw you in person was when I broke my foot. We were out bouldering.
I remember that so well. I was really concerned.
Too well, yeah. But I'm fine now. I just, I don't know if I told you, but when that happened, I'm just like, well, crap, I obviously can't do anything in my normal workout. But it was time for me to change it anyway. So I just decided to go inverted and do handstand push-ups and fingertip push-ups and focus on kind of like the more internal strength and balance and that sort of thing. And I accidentally became superhuman after that happened. It was one of the best things that ever happened. Yeah, it was fantastic because it just forced me to get creative and focus on things that I knew that I should have been doing. You know, like the core exercises and the balance work and the mobility. And when you combine that with kind of functional strength, you turn into kind of like an acrobat.
That's really cool.
I feel comfortable calling you that. When we were out hiking, I know we have Pedram got some footage of it, but you just jump all over everything. It's like hiking with a big kid. It's awesome. So the fat kid grew up and turned into an acrobat.
That's a cool thing. I guess so.
I actually, because I get so many of them, don't read many diet books anymore. I kind of had my fill for a while, so to speak, but I did read yours, and I thought it was excellent. It talks about the dimension of time as it relates to the human being and health and diet specifically as well. Not many books really talk about that. Could you give folks a little primer on your approach?
For sure. You know, the big message is that weight struggles are not math errors. You know, they're not mistakes in adding or subtracting calories. It's a survival response.
Yeah.
A number of factors that make our bodies prepare for famine, you know, prepare for hibernation. And we've got more things pushing those buttons than ever before. And the way it throws us off, it changes our daily circadian rhythms. So yeah, I talked about not so much just food restriction per se, but more so food timing to really rebuild those rhythms.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been told, you know, never eat carbs in the morning, or never eat carbs in the midday, or never eat carbs at night. Why is your advice worth following?
You know, for those who have had struggles where things haven't gone easy for them, the trick is you can have responsible amounts of some good carbs and time those to where you're having more of them as the day progresses. And the idea is you can help specifically with cortisol cycles. And there's a lot of data saying that people who are easily regaining weight or having a hard time losing weight, there's an issue of their cortisol timing. So this is a strategy that can help to correct that timing.
What sort of dinner do you eat?
You know, somewhere around a cup of healthy carbs, and the dose can vary based on someone's goals, their size, their activity, but around a cup is good.
Yeah.
I love vegetable-based carbs especially. The great ones from squash, from root vegetables, you know, and somewhere around a cup of those, but more so in the evening. So
Yeah.
at night, that helps turn off the cortisol response and helps you get good, deep sleep. And you get to take that food and convert it into glycogen, which is your body's, like, one of its favorite fuels.
Yeah. Well, I got to relate a personal story. When I started really experimenting with meal timing and carb timing as well, I found that, you know, I was never that great of a sleeper. But when I started focusing on a big sweet potato or maybe a bunch of rice and too much rice, you know, like an amount that I thought would make me gain fat, I would happily conk out at like 8:30 or 9 p.m. and then just sleep really, really well and wake up without an alarm after I started doing that for a little while. And I thought, maybe there's something to this. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's resulted in remarkable changes, not just in my health, but my habits. Because nothing good happens after 9 o'clock at night.
Nothing good, not much legal.
That's right. But it's true. So why do the carbs at night help improve sleep?
So here's how that works. And think about the Thanksgiving myth. Oh, he's napping because he ate all that turkey with tryptophan.
Yeah.
Well, no. So what happens is that high amounts of carbs that cause our body to make insulin, they pull all the amino acids out of our bloodstream, and they leave tryptophan all by itself. So turkey is really not that high in tryptophan compared to other foods. But if you get any kind of even just the protein you've already got in circulation, if you have carbs in the right ways, that can leave tryptophan by itself, which then drives your brain to make serotonin and melatonin. And they make you feel relaxed and at ease and sleepy. And that's not helpful for breakfast, but it's really helpful in the evening.
But can't you just do that with a pill?
You can in some ways. So here's the thing. Yeah, good call. So you can take supplemental tryptophan, and you can drive the production of serotonin to some extent, melatonin more so. You can also do that with 5-hydroxytryptophan, but there's independent effects that occur with cortisol suppression with the insulin response that don't occur from just tryptophan by itself. So you can get some of the benefits in terms of the sleep. You probably wouldn't see all the benefits in terms of like the depth of the sleep that you get from turning off the cortisol.
Yeah, I love it. There's kind of a difference between the approach of eating some rice and encouraging your body to follow its natural rhythms and just kind of do the thing that it's supposed to do at that moment, and blasting your brain with all these neurotransmitters that you hope will do the right thing. We know which side you fall on, and it certainly shows up in the way that you live. Now, what about earlier in the day and around midday for someone who is a semi-active professional, say, with a day job?
If someone is active, busy, they're physically active, add in half a cup or so of healthy starch with the midday meal. If someone is really struggling with their weight, the midday you can really leave it lower carbs as well. Your morning, you definitely want to get quality protein. Your lunch, you can do it midway through for a simple way.
You also talk about some more interesting types of fiber and carbs. Like, I think it was in your book, didn't you talk about banana flour?
I did, yeah.
What's the significance of that?
Well, so that's the thing. There's a lot of benefits of fiber, and we've got the soluble fiber and the insoluble fiber, but there's this thing that's had more research lately called resistant fiber. Mm-hmm. And you've also heard it called resistant starch. You hear both terms. I kind of like fiber. It's got more of a positive connotation. So probably the worst state of blood sugar control would be glycogen storage disease. And that's a genetic disorder in which people can't pull up any sugar out of storage. And they can die if they don't eat for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And no one sleeps with the condition. And about a decade ago, people with this disease realized that if they consume foods high in resistant fiber, they could get 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep and stable blood sugar. That never happened before. And this is really also the holy grail for burning fat, raising energy, offsetting diabetes, keeping your brain sharp, sleeping better. Dialing in your blood sugar gives you all those benefits. Foods that contain that, they help in those same ways. And that's a big part also of adrenal stress.
Yeah.
So all these things that push the body in storage mode, they do so because they create adrenal stress. Mm-hmm. And the adrenals also have to manage the blood sugar. So the more your blood sugar is already pegged and stable, the easier it is on the adrenal glands.
Yeah. And you mentioned some holistic factors, lifestyle factors like breathing that I think a lot of people would be familiar with, but you mentioned some things that I hadn't really seen many talk about, specifically teas, tonics, and other adaptogenic herbs that can help your adrenals.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those, and at the same time, I have a lot of mixed feelings about all the popular adrenal products.
Yeah.
What happens is that if your adrenal function is not great, it's not great in 3 very distinct ways. You're overproducing cortisol, you're underproducing it, or the timing is not right.
Yeah.
And based on which of those patterns you're in, the solutions are completely different. What helps high cortisol doesn't help low cortisol.
Right. So, Alan, I think what you're saying is that if someone knows that they have an adrenal problem, perhaps they shouldn't just go into the local CVS and buy something called adrenal support.
Right. That's not like buying a shoe. Like you could randomly choose a shoe from Zappos, and you're going to get the right size, style, gender. Yeah, so when the glands are not working right, they're not working right in 3 very different ways. You can overdo cortisol, you can undermake cortisol, or you can just make it at the wrong times.
Yeah.
And each of those requires very distinct solutions. So yeah, people can learn about that from a simple quiz and know what their best fits are.
What are most people looking at, or is it not that easy?
It's not that big of a spread, in all honesty. The most common by a slight factor is the second stage. So the stages we have are stage 1, 2, and 3. I call them stressed. We've got persistent high cortisol, and then wired and tired, where cortisol is just made too low sometimes and too high other times, and then crashed, where it's consistently low.
Yeah.
And there's a slight tendency towards wired and tired being the most common, followed by stressed, and followed by crashed. But even crashed is still about 20%. So there's not a clear obvious first guess.
I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about, but what is crashed like?
So crashed is where the body's really just decompensated. With the stress response, the first part is we become hypervigilant. We overproduce these responsive hormones, and we're in a state of just high engagement. We're really active, and we may feel energized or motivated or driven. If it goes on too intensely too long, it becomes unpleasant. And eventually our timing gets thrown off, and our energy gets sporadic. We've got bursts of being active, but then we can't sleep at night. That's the wired and tired. And the crash state is pretty much just that. You push too hard and too long and burnt the candle at both ends and all those metaphors, and now you just cannot keep up with your basic day-to-day duties.
Yeah. So in terms of a protocol to get someone from lowest of the low back up, where do you start?
The exciting thing about the dietary approach was we saw that it alone could correct that function.
Wow.
We did a clinical trial using very careful to only use the diet. I encourage the participants not to do lifestyle changes or meditation or any number of good things they could have done, but just focus on the diet as the only variable. In terms of time frames between the diet, and if people also do pursue additional strategies like the targeted adaptogens, it's rarely more than 3 months to go from crashed all the way back to thriving again, back to being healthy and vibrant.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really more than a few weeks to see clear benefits, but the 3 months you get back, what I mean by that is that's where you're just, living life and you're not really doing a lot to keep you there. You're back on track and you've got your homeostasis returned.
Yeah. Well, one of the cool things too about your diet is I was looking at it in comparison to a lot of the new flashy diets or the popular ones or paleo or especially back to farm to table, which I totally support, by the way. But when people get started and they're especially only eating grass-fed meats and pastured dairy if they can find it and things like that, that's not cheap usually.
Sure.
But rice is, and banana flour is. So I was looking at your diet, and I thought it was interesting that it kind of brings some of the rational thinking back to what you're putting in your body. So, meaning that you can eat nutrient-dense foods, but you can also round it out, especially if you're active, which you should be, with cheaper sources of calories.
Yeah, and that's a big factor for just convenience. You're right, cost effectiveness, and sometimes also just frequency of food preparation. It can make it easier. Yeah,
and when you look at other, we're travelers and spend a lot of time abroad. When you look at the way that other places that have remarkably healthy people, especially indigenous, they'll eat all sorts of different macronutrients. That's why there is no real, paleo diet. It's more about eating something that your body is well adapted to eat. So what are some of the surprising things, because I know there are a few of them that we haven't mentioned already that you might find in your dietary approach compared to some of the other ones out there?
Well, I guess the fact that I am a fan of carbs, we can burn fat and protein for sure, and there's times and places where that's a huge advantage. There's a lot of data about, the ketosis diets being a benefit for certain brain states or whatnot. But there's always whenever we do burn things besides carbs, we have to use cortisol to help with that. And, in certain contexts that can be a targeted strategy, but other times that can be counterproductive. So the carbs is part of that. I also do encourage beans and legumes.
Yeah.
And there are things that are uniquely high in the resistant fiber, also the insoluble fiber. And the data is strong that our health, it's often a product, of course, of our flora. And we hear so much talk about the common aerobic bacteria, the things we take pills for. Well, they're the tail of the dog at best. They're like maybe 1% of our flora.
Yeah.
The bulk of our flora is anaerobic, and it's not, the pills we take has no effect upon that, but the foods we eat do. One of the big problems we see is a poor ratio of Bacteroidetes to Firmicutes, and the data is so strong that used properly, legumes can be tools that really shift that back and put the body back to a thriving state away from the storage state.
So what's the problem with legumes? If you're to play devil's advocate, why is there so much anti-bean rhetoric out there?
I would even go bigger than the beans. I
Yeah.
think a lot of it has been fear about phytotoxins.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a large number of chemical defenses that plants have. You live in the part of the world, you're in the part of the world now to where plants also have physical defenses.
Yeah. Right.
In most places, they just have chemical defenses. So a plant needs to turf out its neighborhood. It can't have somebody set up camp right next door and eat all the quality stuff away from its soil.
Right.
So there's a big list of phytotoxins that ward off neighbors, that ward off yeasts, that ward off some insects. And if we have these things in our diets, assuming it's not the exact same one all the time, we got some variety of them, they're crazy healthy. The data is real strong that things like inositol hexaphosphatate, IP6 from phytic acid, for example,
Mm-hmm.
cuts the risk of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. So these phytotoxins, they're good things. And there certainly are some exceptional circumstances in which they're not. But by and large, it's good to have more diversity in our diet and a more range of foods rather than a narrower range.
I love that. And that's the take-home point, I think, is that most of us, it's really easy to get obsessed with the top 6 foods of any particular dietary approach. But the thing that's the most rewarding is, instead of doing that, is kind of the opposite, the shotgun approach, going and finding the weirdest foods you can. That's what we always do, just going to farmers markets and seeing, like, the uglier it is, the better it is for you, is a general rule that I follow.
That's awesome. I love that.
And it's
Or
fun.
something you've never seen before.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to figure out what the heck to do with it, and so sometimes that's a disaster, but most of the time it just tastes a little bit like a potato or something, whatever it is. And sometimes we don't know. We after traveling around, that was one little hobby that we had, is like looking at a tree and being like, I wonder if fruit comes from that. I wonder if it's edible. And just kind of asking the locals about the things that only grow there, that they're proud of, that they never export. And it is just,
Wow.
it's shocking the diversity of foods and fruits, or even when you look at apples, where they originally came from. So very different from what you might find in the supermarket. So what's a modern dieter to do? What are the steps that you can take to actually, if you're not always looking for weird food like us, what can you do? What can you do to improve diversity within your own diet?
Kind of a funny thing along those same lines is I think a big part of the approach is also cognitive.
Yeah.
So in writing the book and seeing studies, I saw so many examples of how mindset and psychology have a measurable effect upon death, or the measurable effect upon cortisol was so much bigger than that from anything else. So with food and diversity, I think a powerful tool is just a mindset of, gratitude we've got access to it, and feeling and having a positive relationship with it. Not having such a fear-based relationship with every possible thing in it that could kill us, and certainly avoiding synthetic chemical weird stuff that's not even food.
Yeah.
But in the realm of good food, having gratitude and thinking about how there's this prana, this life force that's being passed on to us, and being thankful for that. And then, I love the idea of just always trying the weird new stuff that you've not had before.
It is a blast. And the funny thing is like, we always befuddle and bewilder the checkout people, because they're just like, I had no idea that we had half this stuff.
Where's the PLU code for that one?
It takes forever to check out. But that's part of the fun. Cool. Well, we're coming up on time here, Alan, but is there anything you'd like to give people for the road?
What I want people to be aware of is that every single tiny atom in your body is coming and going, and
Yeah.
it's changing. In the course of the year, they're all turned over, besides like a few fraction of a percent. So wherever you're at, if there's something that's not where you want it to be, just know that change is normal. It's not mystical. That you can achieve whatever health goals you want.
I love that. Yeah, the fact that we're turning over to literally all of your cells are different every few months. That's I think that's pretty inspiring, especially when you look at the success of other people who have kind of applied these principles. In just a few weeks, you can see that they become 10 years younger, sometimes more than that. It's it's shocking. Well, Alan, so where can folks find you?
Best place is Dr. Christianson.com, CHRIST IANSON, drchristianson.com.
Awesome. And the name of your book?
The Adrenal-Reset Diet.
The Adrenal-Reset Diet. Like I said, I have read it. It's one of the more unique books that I found, and I really enjoy it. I would say, if it were up to me, Alan, it would be among my top picks of 2014 that I read.
Wow.
It's great. Well, Alan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk, as always, and we'll go on that hike soon.
Likewise. Sounds good. Take care, Abel.
All right, chat soon.